Ryan Avery had always believed wealth meant power, but he never imagined an old building could break that idea so easily. When he stepped into the abandoned school where he studied as a child, the smell of mold and peeling paint hit him like a memory he wished he could erase. There was too much silence for a place meant to hold life. As he walked through the broken hallways, he noticed small handprints on the walls, as if a child had tried to leave a quiet cry for help. The floor creaked. The windows let the wind slip through without resistance. And every detail whispered this same unsettling question. Where were the adults meant to care? Why had no one protected this space? Then he heard soft footsteps. Luke Matthews appeared from a back doorway, clutching a torn notebook against his chest. The boy stared at him with a mix of fear and curiosity, as if seeing a giant who could be either danger or salvation. And in that moment, Ryan understood that ignoring this school would be the same as abandoning that child. Ryan stepped back when he heard the crack in the ceiling, but Luke's frightened eyes pushed him forward instead of away. Dust drifted down in a slow, delicate fall, as if the building were breathing its last. The urgency in the air felt heavy, and Ryan realized the school wasn't just damaged. It was wounded, neglected, and on the brink of giving up. He guided Luke out of the room carefully. The hallway felt colder than before, as if the walls themselves had accepted their fate. Paint peeled in long strips that curled like tired fingers, and the floor carried stains that had blended into the structure over years of silence. Ryan tried to imagine children walking there every day, and felt something twist inside him. When they reached the main hall, Helen Dawson was waiting with her arms crossed. She didn't flinch when dust drifted from the ceiling. She didn't jump when the old doors groaned. She looked like someone who had grown used to disasters. But when she saw Ryan, her expression sharpened, not with hostility, but with a weary suspicion that had been built over years of disappointment. She approached slowly, studying the tall stranger moving through her dying school. Luke stayed close but silent, watching the exchange. The air felt charged with questions, none of them voiced. Helen's eyes said one thing clearly. People came. Terribly talked people, promised. And then they vanished. Ryan could almost feel the weight of all those letdowns pressing on her shoulders. He asked how long the school had been in that condition. Helen answered with a tired rhythm, as if she had rehearsed the explanation dozens of times. Years of budget cuts. Years of requests ignored. Years of patching holes instead of fixing causes. Ryan's jaw tightened. He had grown up here, yet he had never imagined it had fallen so far. As he walked toward the courtyard, old memories rose like photographs developing in water. He saw flashes of his childhood self, running across cracked concrete and clutching dreams much bigger than his friend. He once believed life could be larger than the walls around him. Now, the walls were disappearing altogether, and the dreams inside them were fading with them. Luke sat on a broken step, quietly flipping through his torn notebook. Ryan sat beside him, not too close. The boy tightened his grip on the fragile pages, embarrassed by their state. Inside, Ryan saw sketches and tiny worlds built in pencil strokes, ideas raw and bright. Luke pressed the notebook to his chest quickly, unsure of how much he wanted to reveal. Helen watched from a distance. She knew Luke was gifted, though he rarely spoke. She knew his curiosity often outgrew the patience of adults, and she feared the boy a spark would dim inside a place that could barely protect him from falling tiles. Ryan sensed that, too. The silence between them felt like a shared understanding neither stated aloud. He asked how many students the school still held. Helen listed the numbers with the precision of someone who had fought too long for resources that never arrived. She spoke of teachers buying their own materials, of a library too unsafe to enter, of rainy days when buckets lined the hallways. Ryan listened without interrupting, though inside everything burned. He stepped into the old gym where leaves scattered across the floor. His childhood coach had once told him that losing was part of life, but giving up was a choice. Ryan closed his eyes. He saw the boy he had been, the one who lost, tried again, learned, grew, a boy who had space to dream. Luke didn't have that space. Not yet. Luke approached him again and asked if Ryan had studied there. He nodded. Luke asked why he came back. Ryan didn't know what to say. Maybe guilt, maybe longing, maybe fate deciding the moment had arrived. But the boy's question echoed inside him. Why do we return to the places that shaped us? Maybe to repay what we never realized we owed. Helen finally introduced herself, still holding back trust. She asked bluntly what Ryan wanted. He didn't answer right away. Promising anything felt dangerous. Too many had promised before. He didn't want to become another reason for that guarded expression on her face. But something in him was already shifting, and he knew it. The wind moved through the hallway, rattling a loose door. Luke tensed. Ryan noticed how the boy used his notebook almost like armor, a fragile shield against the world. He saw himself there, too, a child protecting dreams with everything he had. He wondered when adults stopped understanding the weight of a child's hope. He asked Helen what she would do if she had unlimited resources. She laughed without humor, but the laugh faded, and she described a school with strong walls, warm light, and enough books for every child. It wasn't luxury, it was dignity, something every student deserved, something too many had been denied. Her words planted a seed in him. He thought of investments he barely remembered signing, projects that raised numbers but changed nothing humane. He looked around that broken building and felt certain that his wealth had been waiting for this moment, waiting for a reason that wasn't profit. Luke watched Ryan closely, as if reading thoughts on his face. The boy didn't understand wealth, but he understood what it meant to be overlooked, and he recognized something different in Ryan. A possibility, a chance. Hope wrapped in uncertainty. Ryan finally asked Helen for every report, every document, every detail of the school's needs. She froze, unsure how to respond. No one had ever asked for the truth in full. She nodded slowly, still cautious, but something soft in her eyes, a tiny crack in the wall she had built. Walking back toward the gate, Ryan understood his visit had become a turning point. The school wasn't just a memory, it was a responsibility. If he left now, he would carry the guilt forever. But staying meant something far greater. Staying meant choosing purpose over comfort. Luke stood in the courtyard, notebook pressed to his chest, watching Ryan like someone watching a door open that he thought would stay shut forever. And in that gaze, Ryan felt a truth settle deep inside him. The kind of truth that changes a life. He wasn't done with that school. Not even close. If this story made you think, subscribe for the next one. In the following days, Ryan carried the image of the school like a weight he could not set down. He sat through meetings without hearing a word. Numbers and projections blended into meaningless patterns. His world of polished boardrooms felt strangely hollow compared to the cracked walls and trembling ceiling he had walked through. Something inside him was shifting, quietly but irreversibly. One evening, unable to focus, he opened an old box of childhood memories. Photographs spilled out, faded at the edges, showing moments he had forgotten. In one picture, a young Ryan held a small science trophy, his smile bright and unguarded. The boy in that photograph looked fearless. Ryan touched the image gently, feeling a distant part of himself call out for acknowledgement. The next morning he returned to the school. but this time with engineers and specialists beside him. When Helen saw the group approaching, her expression hardened before softening with something close to hope. She tried not to show it. She had learned not to trust easily. People liked to tour broken things without fixing them. She braced herself for disappointment, even as a thread of belief tugged at her. The team inspected every corner. They measured scribbled notes, climbed ladders, and tested beams. Ryan followed closely, growing quieter with each observation. The damage was deeper than he anticipated. The building was not simply worn out. It was failing. Helen watched all of this, as if holding her breath, unsure whether she was witnessing the beginning of a rescue or another empty gesture. Luke watched from the steps, just as he had during Ryan's first visit. He held his notebook open on his lap, sketching structures made of imagination and hope. Ryan approached him between assessments and asked what he was drawing. Luke hesitated, then showed him a design for a support system he imagined might hold up the ceiling. Ryan was struck by the creativity and sincerity in the boy's idea. Helen joined them, explaining that Luke had always been curious, always asking questions, always thinking beyond the immediate problems. She said it with both pride and sadness, knowing curiosity often struggled to survive inside neglected walls. Ryan looked at Luke and felt something settle firmly in his chest. A school like this could smother a mind like his that could not stand. When the engineers finished their evaluation, they gathered inside the teacher's lounge to deliver their conclusion. The verdict was harsh. The structure was compromised beyond repair. The entire school needed reconstruction from the ground up. Helen sat down slowly, staring at the floor. She dreaded Ryan's reaction. No one had ever taken on something this big for them. Silence filled the room. Ryan absorbed the information, then looked up with a steady expression. He said he would rebuild the school completely. Not patch it, not mend it, but give it a new beginning. Helen blinked, unable to process his certainty. She asked, "Why?" Her voice cracked slightly, betraying how deeply she feared disappointment. He told her he owed this place more than he realized, that it shaped him into who he became, that he had spent years investing in everything except what mattered most. He said, rebuilding the school felt like a debt finally coming due. Helen listened with her hands shaking slightly. She had waited years for someone to care this deeply. She never expected it would be someone who once walked those same halls. Word spread quickly. Some believed it immediately, others dismissed it as a rich man's impulse. But the children were the only ones who trusted without hesitation. They ran around imagining new classrooms, vibrant libraries, and bright computer labs. Luke was especially alive with excitement. His steps felt lighter, as if hope itself had started carrying him. Soon the sound of heavy machinery echoed across the yard. Walls came down, and the building let out its last exhausted breath. It was bittersweet, but destruction was the first act of rebuilding. The community gathered to watch. Helen stood nearby, covering her mouth when the first wall collapsed. For years, she had fought for the school to stay standing. Now she was watching it fall for the right reason. Ryan visited the site every day. He spoke with workers, reviewed blueprints, and listened to the children's ideas. Luke asked for a library filled with color. Helen asked for classrooms that stayed dry in the rain. Ryan wrote down every request. He wanted the new school to honor the voices of those who had endured the old one. It was no longer simply a project. It was a promise. As the foundation was laid, Ryan felt a strange ache in his chest. Not from stress, but from realization. This was only the beginning. There were other schools just like this one, forgotten and collapsing. He wondered how many children sat in unsafe rooms, believing no one cared, That thought stayed with him like a quiet echo he could not silence. Luke kept visiting the construction site, sometimes sitting on the freshly delivered materials, sometimes drawing new ideas. Ryan found comfort in the boy's presence. Luke reminded him of what pure belief looked like. He carried his notebook like a companion, a vessel of dreams unspoiled by doubt. Watching him, Ryan felt renewed strength. Helen, though still stern in posture, had softened around the edges. She allowed herself to smile more often. She worked with Ryan's team, offering insight that only someone who lived the struggle could provide. Ryan respected her immensely. She was proof that resilience could look tired and still be unwavering. The new building began to rise. Strong beams stretched toward the sky. Walls took shape, and sunlight entered spaces that once sat in darkness. Children from the neighborhood peeked through the fences every day, whispering about the future. Parents volunteered to paint, carry materials, or bring food. The school had become a community heartbeat, something everyone wanted to protect. When the final exterior wall was completed, Ryan stepped back and stared at the new structure. It felt so real. What once stood fragile and forgotten now rose confident and bright. But he knew this was more than a single victory. It was a beginning. A spark, the kind of spark that could spread if fed with courage and commitment. He remembered the promise he made silently the day he first saw Luke clutching his torn notebook, to never let a child feel forgotten again. And as he looked at the gleaming new school, he knew he was ready to take the next step toward that mission. If this story made you think, subscribe for the next one. When the school finally reopened, a crowd gathered outside the new gates, painted in bright colors that seemed to glow under the sun. Children pressed their hands against the cool metal, eager to enter. Parents stared at the building in disbelief. Ryan stood among them quietly, watching the moment unfold like a scene he had once dreamed but never thought he would witness. Inside, the hallways felt alive. Sunlight poured through wide windows, painting the floors with warm patterns. Classrooms smelt of new books and fresh paint. Luke walked through each corridor as if exploring a new world, touching every surface to make sure it was real. His torn notebook, now taped carefully along the edges, bounced lightly against his side with each step. Helen stepped into the library and froze. The shelves stood tall and full, holding stories she once prayed her students could reach. Her eyes soft, and she touched the spines one by one, almost reverently. She had imagined this room for years, long before she believed it was possible. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe more deeply than she had in a long time. Ryan walked slowly, absorbing details. Each corner seemed to hold a silent echo of what the building used to be. Broken walls replaced by bright spaces. Darkness replaced by possibility. He watched children run freely, their laughter filling the rooms like a long-awaited celebration. It was the sound of a promise fulfilled. Luke guided him to the science room, where tables sparkled and equipment waited for curious hands. The boy's smile stretched wide, brighter than any light in the room. Ryan realized that this space was no longer about him repaying a debt. It was about Luke and every child who would pass through these doors for decades to come. The community streamed inside, parents taking pictures, teachers wiping their eyes secretly, neighbors whispering about how everything felt transformed. Helen tried to keep things organized, but soon gave up, letting the happiness move like a wave through the rooms. Ryan felt his chest tighten, not with worry, but with a deep and steady pride. Luke tugged on Ryan's sleeve and brought him outside to the back of the school. There, where the ground had once been cracked and forgotten, a new garden stretched across the space. Small plants reached toward the sky. A wooden sign read Community Garden. Luke explained that the students would care for it together. Ryan knelt and touched the soil, feeling its warmth. Helen joined them and revealed that the children had chosen the garden themselves. They wanted something living, something that grew with them. Ryan looked at Luke, who nodded shyly. He realized the garden symbolized much more than learning. It was renewal, patience, and belief woven into roots and leaves. But as Ryan watched everyone celebrating, a quiet thought kept returning. This was only one school, one victory, a single light against a landscape full of shadows. He remembered the photos he had seen of collapsing classrooms across the country. He remembered the stories Helen told. He remembered Luke holding his torn notebook, representing millions who waited silently for hope. When he stepped onto the small stage in the courtyard, the crowd quieted. Ryan spoke of gratitude, of childhood memories, of the school that shaped him. But as he spoke, he felt a new certainty rising inside him, clear and powerful. He paused, looked at the families, the teachers, the children whose eyes shimmered with expectation. Then he announced his next step. He would not stop here. He would create a foundation to rebuild broken schools across the nation, beginning with those most forgotten. For a heartbeat, the courtyard stood in stunned silence. Then Helen covered her mouth in shock. Luke's eyes widened, and hope burst into applause that echoed through the new walls. In the days that followed, Ryan's announcement spread quickly. Interviews, articles, messages from strangers. But whenever he spoke publicly, he focused not on money or strategy, but on the children whose futures depended on places built to protect their dreams. He carried Luke's notebook drawings in his briefcase as a reminder of what truly mattered. The foundation formed faster than expected. Architects, volunteers, teachers, and donors appeared from everywhere. Some offered services, others offered time, others simply wanted to believe in something that made the world feel less heavy. Ryan felt humbled. He understood that the mission was larger than anything he had attempted. Luke visited him often, bringing new sketches. He asked questions about structures, materials, time. Ryan listened with patience, amazed by the boy's curiosity. Luke had become more than an observer. He was a symbol of the future the foundation aimed to protect. His imagination reminded Ryan that this work was about nurturing the next generation's ability to dream boldly. Helen became an essential part of the team. Her experience with underfunded schools gave her a voice that guided their decisions. She knew which communities were at risk of losing their schools entirely. She knew which children felt forgotten. She became the foundation moral compass, and Ryan trusted her deeply. The first school selected for reconstruction stood in a remote mountain town. When Ryan visited, he saw children studying in rooms with cracked floors, cold air slipping through broken windows, and water stains spreading like bruises across the ceiling. His heart tightened. The pain he felt was familiar, too familiar. As he left that town, Ryan realized he had crossed the threshold. This was no longer a project. It was a calling. Everywhere he went, he saw versions of Luke, versions of himself, growing inside unsafe walls. He could not unsee them. He could not leave them behind. He carried each place with him like a silent vow. The second reconstruction moved faster than the first. Experience shaped efficiency, but compassion shaped decisions. Ryan met with teachers, children, and parents. He asked what they needed most. Some wanted warmth, some wanted books, some simply wanted a roof that did not leak. He listened to all of them carefully, taking notes as if recording sacred truths. At night, he read letters from students thanking him, writing in uneven handwriting about hope and possibilities. Some drew pictures of what their new school might look like. Ryan kept every letter. They weren't praise. They were reminders. They were guideposts. They were reasons to keep going. Months later, during a visit to the first school, Ryan found Luke sitting in the library, surrounded by tall shelves filled with stories. The boy looked up, smiled, and asked when they could visit the next project. Ryan laughed softly, touched by the sincerity of the question. Luke was no longer simply part of the past. He was part of the road ahead. And in that moment, Ryan understood something clear and profound. He was not just changing lives. He was being changed by them. Forever. If this story made you think, subscribe for the next one. Ryan walked through the new school in quiet reflection, listening to the sound of children playing as if it were a melody from a life he had forgotten. Each step reminded him that he was not only rebuilding structures, but also reclaiming pieces of himself left behind in old memories. The present and the past moved together in a slow, comforting rhythm. In the courtyard, he watched Luke running between friends, his once torn notebook now filled with new pages and new worlds. The boy seemed taller, not in size, but in courage. Ryan realized that by saving this school, he had given Luke something far greater than walls and books. He had given him the belief that the future could be shaped, not feared. Helen stood at the library entrance, her expression softer than he had ever seen. She carried herself with the calm of someone who had finally been heard after years of shouting into silence. For the first time in a long time, she felt supported, not as a formality, but as a shared mission carried by many shoulders instead of just her own. Ryan knew this journey would never truly end. There would always be another school waiting, another community hoping, another child clutching a notebook and wondering if anyone cared. He accepted that weight with quiet determination. It was no longer a burden. It was a purpose that reshaped the course of his life. As he stepped through the gates, the wind brushed against his face like a gentle reminder of the boy he once was, and Ryan understood with a clarity that warmed him deeply that true wealth was not found in the towers he built or the deals he closed, but in what he returned to the world. Because real wealth starts inside. If this story made you think, subscribe for the next one.